I'd like to spend a couple of moments just talking about our next speaker, Greg Raifman, the keynote this morning. He's the president of the Rubicon Project, and the topic he'll cover in his keynote is about automating the buying and selling of advertising in our world today. He started to try to do this in 1999. He's still working on it and still very passionate about it. He's president of the Rubicon Project, which serves both buyers and sellers of both premium and remnant inventory globally. His company have just completed a huge deal in the mobile space with a partner of SMG's called InMobi to bring automation to the mobile native advertising space. This is the first time an ARF audience measurement conference has put such an emphasis on automation and programmatic, and I think that's a good thing. The current media world has too many opportunities to improve both efficiency and effectiveness without paying attention to automation. Automation can cover all kinds of workflow, and as we know, fragmentation of media exposures continues. An automated trading platform to manage most of this is the only way that we can all survive and thrive. Programmatic can be a scary word to many people, and I'm not going to debate the specific definition of it, but I think from our perspective, we see significant upside as more and more discrete, powerful data gets used more widely across all media types. The automated trading based on pre-agreed audiences, campaign needs, and inventory specifications will allow us all to focus more on consumer insight, focus parts of our business which may range from what content to expose, what new content to create, how to understand richer segmentations of who and how consumers are responding, and then analytic practices to optimize the full marketing spend across all of the different data platforms that we have access to. It's hard to spend much time on those if we're spending all of our time monitoring and buying each individual part of a campaign in a so-called manual way. Greg's going to talk about how Rubicon is investing in automated platforms around the world to connect buyers and sellers much more efficiently and ultimately to improve ROI for the brands that use them. And he's got a very cool video to start his presentation, so we'll play that now.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Kate, for the very kind words. It's really nice to be here with you, talk about one of my favorite subjects, the world of automation for advertising. And I think probably many of you aren't that familiar with Rubicon Project, so I want to just give you a minute or two on that, and then we'll start on automation. So we have been focused completely since 2007, we got started on our mission to automate the buying and selling of advertising, and all advertising, not just digital or display advertising, but all advertising. We envision a world where all forms of advertising will be bought and sold on our automated platform. We run one of the largest automated media buying platforms in the world, and we work with some of the very most well-respected and largest brands, agencies, publishers worldwide. We take our automation initiative across the 4 corners of the globe, and we reach over 600 million users worldwide, which is actually 3 times as large as what we do in the United States. So in a nutshell, we are automating the buying and selling of all advertising. We started with display first. So that's Rubicon Project. And today, I'd like to talk to you about the world of automation and how it applies to our industry, advertising. Because you're going to hear a lot over yesterday, today, tomorrow on programmatic technologies, programmatic trading, all forms of programmatic. And ironically, we don't really like to use the word programmatic at Rubicon Project because we don't think it captures the full opportunity for automation in your industry. We feel like that only captures part of it, the first half, trading, execution. And that's really what we've been focusing on for the last 5 years in our industry, how to execute trades better. But there's other aspects of automation that we're at the point where we need to focus on in the next 5 years, and not just the trading part, but a lot of what you guys do, the packaging, the RFP process, the back office workflow automation pieces. And there's another reason why we don't love the word programmatic is because there's kind of a connotation that all we need to do is turn it over to the machines, and that basically the machines do everything. And in reality, it's far from the case. Automation is about making your life better. It's about making you more productive and more efficient. I mean, think about it this way. When you get into your car and you put on your GPS system, you're not letting the GPS system drive the car for you. It just helps you get from point A to point B faster. And similarly, I flew in from California yesterday, and I was pretty happy to know that there were pilots running the plane, even though, in large part, planes could be very, very self-automated. So, it's a bit of a misnomer to think that we can just turn it all over to the machines and we can go from there. At the same time, where we've seen automation so effective is that when you're dealing with industries that get to scale, or need to get to scale, and you're talking about hundreds upon hundreds of millions of users doing billions and billions of transactions and transacting billions of dollars, you'll find that in those industries, with the advent and growth of automation, they've become far more successful. In fact, those industries needed a standardization or a technology or a platform to really be able to take advantage at scale. And we think about advertising as maybe one of the last frontiers for automation, not really a trendsetter. So when you look at financial services, and obviously we can go down the street to see the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, when automation really began in financial trading, it started with low-cap stocks, stocks that we couldn't find readily as easily as the large-cap stocks, like the IBMs of the world or RJR Nabisco's in the time. Now, of course, you can trade any stock through electronic means. It's very easy to find even low-cap stocks. Travel is very similar. When American Airlines started the Sabre systems, it did it to sell unsold seats. Then it spun off Sabre Systems, and now Sabre Systems is actually the platform by which we can buy seats for any airline, or find rent-a-car companies, or of course, hotels. And in fact, you'll see that some of the most expensive brands in the world, like Four Seasons or Ritz-Carlton, work with Sabre Systems. So, retail was another example of that, where eBay automated the flea market environment. And where they started, we know the stories about how it was started to sell Pez or very low-end inventory. It moved quickly to the point where, if you look at it now, a car is sold every minute on eBay. You can see multi-million-dollar homes for sale on eBay now. You can see planes for sale on eBay, right? So we've seen that in most of these markets that automation starts on the lower end. And we've seen that also with advertising. In the last 5 years, we've started with remnant or unsold advertising in a more automated fashion, and we're moving up to mid-market now through private exchanges and actual private deals. And we expect there's a time where all inventory, most expensive inventory, will also be sold or bought in an automated fashion. Even the holy grail of advertising, the Super Bowl ads or the Olympics. So let's take a look for a minute about the numbers. The numbers speak for themselves. We all know the numbers. Not really a big surprise there, right? We know internet spending has gone up dramatically in the last 10 years. We've also seen it take share from print, which has also gone down dramatically in the last 10 years. But what's most interesting about the fact that internet spending has grown is that the part of internet ad spending that's grown the most, has been the part that has been automated the most. So when you look at the chart behind me, you'll see that in the center, what we call real-time bidding, you heard a little bit about that earlier, has grown dramatically faster than any other sector. In fact, in the last 5 years, it's gone from nothing to almost to 10 billion. And we expect it to double again in the next 3-4 years to over 20 billion, which means at that point, it'll be over about 25% of all internet ad spend in a very short period of time. Much faster than like television growth at 5%. RTV is growing at about 60%, okay, per year. So the part that's grown the fastest is the part that's been the most automated. And that's a very interesting point to note. And when you go backwards in time, our predecessors didn't really need automation, right? It was so much more manageable back then. At that point in time, we were trying to reach a family of 5 on one device, typically in the living room or one's bedroom to watch TV. And we could send one ad to millions of people at the same time. And we could reach that family of 5 in a pretty easy or easier environment in that sense. So we created these processes, most of which were manual, to affect those types of transactions. And it's worked great. We've created quite a great industry by doing it. But the world has changed. And it's changed quite a bit. And now it's a very distributed and fragmented world. Now that same family of 5 is bombarded with ads from the moment it gets up in the morning to the time it goes to sleep at night. Thousands of ads a day on multiple devices. Each person in the family has multiple devices. My wife laments that I have too many cell phones and too many tablets and too many computers. And so when you think about it, we're not even though we might be all on our smartphone or our mobile phone, we could be in mobile web, we could be looking at video, we could be in BuzzFeed, we can be on blogs, we could be on just the general web, we could be on TV, we could be in so many different mediums. So it's gotten so much more complicated than it was before to reach that same family of 5. And the manual processes that have been put in place years ago maybe aren't as effective as they used to be to try and reach this new distributed world. So it's maybe not a surprise for us that we heard last week or the week before that some big brands like Procter & Gamble, American Express are reportedly moving towards programmatic or automation. Reports saying that Procter & Gamble is moving as much as 70 to 75% of its $3+ billion a year spend. Now we all know Procter & Gamble is, if not the largest, one of the largest buyers of advertising media all over the world. Over give or take $3.5 billion a year. And they live in the retail environment, an environment where you don't expect to hear the results of your campaign for months. But they're now saying, you know what, we need to move towards automation. American Express sent out an RFP saying, what would happen if we moved 100% to automation? Big brands, big direct marketers now thinking that we need to become more efficient. We need to get more out of our dollar. We're getting more pressure to be more productive. Not really very surprising when you think about it. So I'd like to I'd like you to hear from somebody who works in this environment, who runs one of the largest private exchanges in the world, an exchange where, for News Corp, runs ad exchanges, where they created a global exchange to make all their properties worldwide that much more effective. And he talks about why they moved to programmatic. So if you'll run the first video, please.
Programmatic in a few different ways and how it complements our direct sales staff. The first tool is a source of automation, right? So if we can automate orders and automate inventory, it allows for a lot more efficiency and allows for us to focus on other things to drive value for our clients. The second tool is really in a real-time environment, so getting higher CPMs or assessing value of inventory from different brands that we normally don't work with, that basically people can access pieces of the Wall Street Journal or pieces of the New York Post or news.com.au in a programmatic environment for brands that we wouldn't necessarily have a direct relationship with, because they can access this inventory programmatically and find value in our inventory programmatically. So it has to exist as a complement to our direct sales staff and other solutions we offer in the digital space.
So interesting enough, complement to their sales team, not a replacement. That's a key point right now. Doing things in real time, doing things more efficient, seeing an increase in CPMs, and also, interesting enough, reaching buyers that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to reach. Very interesting point. Actually, now, Mr. Weiss has his work cut out for him too, because he lives in a very complicated world. He's looking to find 2.5 billion users across the web now on 1.5 billion smartphones. His properties compete against 40 billion other web pages. His users might be on tablets, 250 million tablets, 1.5 billion smartphones, very distributed environment. And he's chasing $60 billion of global display spend. So let me show you a little bit about how this process works. And I don't want to get too far into the details, but I want to show you how quickly this all works. And it's very similar to what we've been doing in a manual way, but it's just a little bit more automated. And basically, the first thing we do is we look to identify the user, very much like what we've been doing for years. And then we look to price the impression. And this is where it gets a little bit different. We do that by relying on 50,000 algorithms in our marketplace, or marketplaces like ours. 50,000 algorithms that are self-learning and self-optimizing all the time, and crunching through petabytes and petabytes of data that have been collected over time. Data that's not about the user, we're not profiling people, but it's data about the impression. Who's going to buy this impression most likely? Where is it on the page? Where is it in the session index? Where is it on the page? Which kind of website is it? A lot of information crunched through in a very short period of time. Then we run the auction. We send out a bid request. In our case, we send out 4 trillion bid requests per month to buyers that we think would want to buy. They send back a bid. We crunch through all that very quickly. We run the auction based on rules that are set up by the seller in the marketplace. We want to make sure it's a brand-safe environment, for example. We want to check for malware that's done instantaneously. We want to make sure it's based on the rules the seller wants. Like, clearly, BMW wouldn't be happy if a Mercedes ad ended up on their page, right? So we want to check for those rules. And then we pick the winning bidder, and we deliver the ad, and the ad shows up. And all of that happens in 80 milliseconds. 80 milliseconds. In a blink of an eye, we've delivered 300,000 ads. 2.5 million ads or transactions per second. Clearly, when you think back to the TV environment of the 60s, we've reached a point where human capabilities can't handle that kind of scale. As we see our industry growing to that kind of scale, we know that we're at a point where we can't go any further with Excel spreadsheets. And what's interesting is these machine learning algorithms, they keep learning, and we keep adding more data. And as we add more buyers and more sellers to these marketplaces, more data is created. More first-party data from buyers, for example, or from sellers. And our ability to track and match buyers to sellers at the right time becomes even better, and it's improving. Now, to do this, we create, and that creates these network effects that I just talked about. To do this, it takes a lot of scale. And we've invested millions upon millions of dollars. In fact, in our industry, billions of dollars in creating that kind of scale. In our organization, we have over 27,000 CPU cores running to crunch this kind of data. There's other players in the industry that have their own set, but enormous amount of scale that it takes, and the larger it grows, the better it works. And what's also interesting is that as we send out more trillions of impressions that you saw in the reel, we're doing it in faster time. Last year was 300 milliseconds. Now we're down to 80 milliseconds. By next year, we'll be at 30 milliseconds. Soon we'll be talking about nanoseconds. So we're doing more in less time. And as I mentioned earlier, from the programmatic perspective, we're now moving up the ad tech stack. We've started with remnant and unsold over the last 5 years. We really focused on getting that right, the execution of it that I just showed you. But now we're moving up. And as we move up, we're dealing with higher CPMs. And we're moving into private exchanges that you saw Charlie Weiss talk about. And soon, ultimately, the premium inventory. We've already moved into deals and orders. One-to-one, one-to-several in deals versus many-to-many in an open auction where you're dealing with perhaps hundreds upon hundreds of buyers and many, many sellers. But as we do this, and as we create this more data that's so valuable for the process, there's kind of a problem there. We've done all this great work in automating the execution piece, but as we move up the stack, we've got to get closer to the people who focus on the strategy and the planning and the buying and the early point. But yet, as you recall, when you think back to Advertising 1.0, it's so filled with manual process right now. It's based in a human transaction, a human negotiation environment, which is good, and we don't want to replace it, but we're still dealing with IOs that go back and forth by fax, and we're still dealing with all these manual processes. Your typical ad campaign in the digital environment takes about 40 man-hours just to put up. And we estimate it's about $40,000 to do a $500,000 campaign. That's crazy. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It can be better. So we heard from a seller perspective. I'd like you to hear now from a buyer perspective, someone I think you guys all know and has been outspoken about pain points for the buyer perspective, the advertiser or the agency perspective on why we need more automation in the buying process today. So if you'd run the second reel, please.
You know, I got the Norma Ray or Canary in a Coal Mine or Pied Piper or whatever because of putting a stake in the ground and saying that 50% of everything that we buy in the US would be automated by the end of 15, and that we will then take that to rest of world. And when I first brought that to our team, I said within 2 years. And they all went, holy shit, there's no possible way we can do that within 2 years. So I said, all right, make it 3, and then we're done having the conversation because the technology is there. You can do it now. And the problem is that we collectively get paid wrong, or if you're a client, you pay your agencies wrong, because we're not actually paid to be efficient. So what happens is an order comes over a fax machine, which, again, you know, back in the time that you and I were doing Pizza Hut, we were getting rid of fax machines.
That's right.
But we're still using them to buy media, which is fascinating. So we send a fax over, and then we transcribe it from one piece of paper to another piece of paper to a third in order to input the order. If they're not paper, they're screens. And there's an awesome opportunity to make mistakes along the way, and there's a great opportunity to piss away a lot of time, which is good, because if you're paid based on time, you can use a lot of it to do that inefficiently, or you can have other people go back and check your mistakes. So you look at that and go, that's just stupid. Like, there is technology in place and has been since the New York Stock Exchange was threatened by the NASDAQ to change this, and yet we're still using faxes and stuff.
So you all felt Matt's pain point. We know what we're talking about. And Matt, I think, is only half right. He's right because we have the technology to do the execution piece that we talked about earlier, but we don't have a lot of technology to help him in the workflow place. And so we've looked at that, and we've studied this area. And we see of the 5 areas, we've been focusing the last 5 years on execution and then reporting. But the first half, the packaging, discovery, negotiation piece is still all manually done. So we really studied this area. We really thought about it. Over the last year, we've worked on it. We've built something that we think we have something that I'd like to show you right now. And so if you'll run the last one, we'll show you a quick product demo of what we've been working on and what we think the automation process is going for the back office systems, for the workflow. So just a quick snippet, roll that last piece. So here you can follow all sellers, just like you can follow your friends on the web or Facebook. You can see their updates. You can be exposed to inventory that you might want to pick and add it to your plan. Keep adding as much as you want. Put your RFP together. Look at data, analytics for each particular package, save your plan. Pick your team, who's going to be the contact people. Send off the plan. Respond when you get the response back from them, from the sellers. Send notes back and forth. Look at the reports. Basically, fully automated workflow for the packaging, discovery, negotiation, execution, and ultimately reporting. We've launched, we're about to launch actually the product in beta in the mobile environment. We expect to go live with it in display later. And I want to come back and I want to talk to you guys about it in the traditional world, the advertising world, how a product like that could be very valuable. We've codenamed this 49 BC because, like Julius Caesar and 49 BC crossing the Rubicon, we think that advertising automation is now at a point of no return. And I'd like to leave you with one thing. I'd like you to imagine the travel industry before before automation capabilities. You need to pick a flight. You call up. You call your favorite airline, United or American or whatever it is. You try and get on that flight. Can't find the right seat, sold out. Try another one. It's too expensive. You go back and forth. Finally, you get your seat and you buy it. Then you go to do the same thing with car companies. You do the same thing with hotels. 4 or 5 hours later, you now got your travel itinerary together. Maybe if it's a detailed one, it could take a day or two. You send the check in the mail. 2 weeks later, your ticket comes, your reservation information, you put it in a folder, you go to the airport, you get to the counter. At the counter, someone pulls out a spreadsheet, looks for your name. Oh yeah, there you are. Then you go on the plane. Imagine that. You can't imagine it because it doesn't exist anymore. And I think we're going to be looking at advertising the same way 5 years from now. We're going to be looking back through that same analogy and that same lens, and we're going to be saying, that's crazy. We used to be sending faxes back and forth. So automation is really your friend. It's your ally. You should embrace the opportunity. It makes you and your team far more productive. It allows you to do what you do best, which is great storytelling, great research, great strategy, great planning, of course, the buying. It creates an environment for you to be far more productive than you could ever have been before in this new world. So thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate being here. Look forward to seeing you soon.